Hi all, this is Jan Almighty and welcome to this video. So today I decided to show you a game between Anatoly Karpov and Boris Katalymov, and it's a game from the USSR Championship semi-final. So like last year, 1970, in 1971 once again Karpov is participating in the semi-final, but this year he will win with an even greater result. So 9 wins and 6 draws, which is pretty amazing. Just looking at the players at that level, and he is clearly saying to the chess officials of the USSR that he is ready for the big guns, he is ready for the challenge, and what will happen probably in the years to come, he will be over the chance, because as we all know 1971 is very close to 1975 when actually Karpov had a chance to play against Bobby Fischer. So okay, moving that out of the way, I decided to show you only this game from the championship because this game features one of the most common motifs and sacrifices in the Sicilian opening. And I wanted to maybe shed a light more on the end game and what is the end result, how actually Karpov with white pieces here handles it, and what maybe you need to think of if you ever find yourself in a situation like that. So let's just jump into the game. Karpov is white and he plays e4. So c5, the Sicilian, knight to f3 and knight to c6. They go for the standard line with exchanges in the center, and now knight to f6 and knight to c3, d6. So pretty standard. Next moves could maybe transpose into the knight or with a6, or maybe even g6 into the dragon, but Karpov stops it with playing bishop to g5, going for the Richter-Rauzer variation. A pretty common line is here e6, which I essentially only seen being played by players against me or even in some top level games. But here Katalymov plays bishop to d7, which is also essentially, I have learned, one of the main lines. We have queen to d2, knight captures on d4, this is now with tempo. Queen has to move once again, queen to a5, attacking the bishop, bishop to d2 and e5. So here Katalymov plays has a little row of very active moves, attacking with tempo. Queen to d3, but now he plays rook to c8. And now it's time to Karpov to catch up with the loss of the tempos, but he plays bishop to g5 once again. And what he wants to do, essentially, he wants to stay in his Richter-Rauzer mode and continue with the bishop on g5, eyeing this knight on f6. We see queen to b4 attacking the pawn here, and queenside castle. It wouldn't be exactly a poisonous pawn variation, but it is a possibility to play this move queen to b2 now after all of this that has been played during this variation. But now, essentially what I have been mentioning before the game, rook captures on c3. A pretty common thing to do in the Sicilian, give up the exchange for the knight on c3. I wouldn't say that it is something that is fairly analyzed in this line, but for example in the dragon variation or even in some variations of the Najdorf, rook can be sacrificed on c3, then a knight captures on e4. In the dragon it brings this bishop to very great strength, having this open diagonal and having the attack on the queen side. It is definitely a very good move, but here in this variation I'm not really sure. It does give black some activity at the beginning, but surely enough Karpov will point out that maybe that wasn't the best move to make. But okay, still, pawn captures on c3. You don't want to exchange queens because okay, I will show you in this variation. After queen to e4, essentially if here queen captures knight to e4, we are in the same situation. This knight becomes really active. You will lose this pawn on e4 in both of the variations, but now the knight on e4 will attack this pawn, and the bishop. Bishop has to come to e3. Stopping the capture of this pawn, which is very dangerous, then forking two rooks. You can go about capturing this pawn, and after rook to d3, this pawn with a check, king to b2, knight to b4, but after rook to b3, you will probably lose both of these pawns. It isn't the best course to take, because you would maybe rather leave white with the double c pawns and go about playing something like f5 or bishop to e7, continue, bishop to c6, continue with the development and enjoying, or okay, of course, a6, do not give up this pawn as well. Enjoy your activity for the time being. But here Karpov didn't take the queen, of course. He played f4, who wants to open up the e file. Queen moves to a4, and now rook to e1, pressuring on e5. So we have knight to g4 defending, and now queen to c4. Now is the time, as Karpov thinks, to exchange the queens, because now knight is on the other side of the board. He is not on this side, so that he can enter the center and become very active. h6 attacking the bishop, but first exchanging the queens. Queen captures and bishop captures, and now bishop to h4. And here black needs to think of the plan. What does he need to do in order to, let's say, get to some advantage? Maybe he has the bishop pair. White also has it, but black's bishop pair can become very much active in this variation where he sacrifices the rook. So here he plays g5. Katalymov plays g5 with an idea of developing bishop on g7. If pawn captures, then bishop to e7 can be played, and then pawn will capture on g5. Pawn cannot capture because bishop to h4 is a threat, and here black would enjoy a very good situation on the king side. So here Karpov plays h3, attacking the knight. Pawn captures here, and pawn captures on g4. Here Katalymov willingly, after bishop to g7, leaves the pawn on h4 because he has picked up the bishop, and this means that he will be the only one with the bishop pair, and he wants to try to play a position such as that one. Here he played bishop to d7. I would much rather see something like bishop to c6, because then king can come on d7, and this way activate the rook and move from the e file, because white is putting a lot of pressure on the e5 pawn. But okay, bishop to d7, we see g3, king to e7, and now g5. Karpov wants to exchange the rooks as well. Bishop to e6, now this pawn is unpinned finally, but we see c4. So also the bishop was attacking on a2. Here we have pawn captures on g5, rook captures on h8, and bishop captures and pawn captures. And now we're finally in the endgame, where, as you can see, black has the bishop pair, white has the exchange, but he is in a situation where he has 2 times double pawns. Not the best of pawn structures, but he is still the one with the edge. And let's see how Karpov approaches this position. First, Katalymov kind of helps him with the move f6, but Karpov doesn't go for the pawn. So he could have just captured the pawn and continued with his plan, but he decided that he wants to do something else. So he played rook to e3, pawn captures on g5, and now rook to b3. He wants to pick up these pawns. b6, rook to a3, a5. So trying to defend the pawns, but after rook to b3, this pawn cannot be defended. We see e4. So not just pushing the passed pawn, but also having this bishop eyeing the whole of this diagonal. So now being a very strong bishop. Rook captures on b6, and now bishop to e5, eyeing this pawn. Rook to b3 and bishop to d4, moving away maybe on this side of the board. Rook to b5 back, so attacking this pawn and attacking this pawn. But now bishop to g4. Katalymov goes for this because he wants to push this pawn to a promotion. And if for some reason white would capture on a5 now, then it would be a draw, because e3 is played, and now you can capture also this pawn, but you cannot stop e2. You cannot come behind with the rook because the king is there. You have to capture the pawn, and the bishop captures, and essentially here white is 3 pawns up, but in this situation it is really hard to play against the bishop pair with the rook. So probably black will manage to capture at least 2 pawns. He can sacrifice one of the bishops for the other pawn, but it is, in a sense, it is really difficult to play this. So of course Karpov didn't want to complicate things. He played king to d2. And now if e3 would be played, it isn't the best move to play king to e1, because bishop to c3 is checkmate. Just wanted to put that out of the way. You should play king to d3, and this way stop the e2 push, because bishop and king are controlling the e2 square. There is no check on f5 because of the rook. The rook is eyeing that square. So now it is a definite win for white. So of course e3 wasn't pushed, but bishop to c5. Still not allowing the capture on a5 because bishop to b4 checks the king and will pick up the rook. So we see bishop to e2 first, wanting to exchange bishops, but bishop to e6, and now king to c3. a4, we see a4, rook to a5, and a3. Now black defends the pawn this way, but this gives an idea to Karpov how to easily resolve this game. King to b3. And after king to f6, he played rook to a3, bishop to a3, king to a3. And in this situation, what he does only have a pawn in the end after all of this that has happened. Only a pawn, but it is a passed a pawn far away from this king and also on the light square where this bishop is coming out. So a lot of things go into white's advantage, and Karpov knew that this will be winning for him. But first, after king to e5, he wants to seal the deal, and he does it with c3. And this is also a very good thing to know, that double pawns can sometimes be very, very useful, because here in this situation they essentially don't allow the black king to come closer to the queen side just by themselves. So there are situations where where the double pawns are useful. Not many, but this is at least one of them. I wanted to also kind of emphasize this situation because I was also in a situation over the weekend where my opponent played something like this, and essentially it helped him to win a game. And here you have two course of actions. You can play d5 to kind of just to get rid of one of the pawns so that the king can come closer to this side. But this simplifies also for white, because after bishop captures you have to play king to b2, and now a4, a5 will be very easy to push. And still your king is very close to this pawn, so you don't have to be afraid there. This is one course of action. The other is what Katalymov played, bishop to d7, and bring the king around to come on to the queen side. But now it is once again pretty straightforward. We see king to b4, bishop to c6 and a4, king to e6, a5, and king to d7. Now what do you want to do? You can play c5 immediately, you can play a6. It is not a problem at all, because what you can do, for example, if you play c5, d5, a6, and enter with the king here. But of course, after king to c7, black wouldn't allow it immediately. But after a couple of tactical shots, essentially you can win this game. And let me just quickly show you. If, for example, bishop plays somewhere, so bishop to d7, you can go about playing a7, so something like this. And here, if king to b7, you have time to play bishop to b5. Essentially, if you want to not allow, no, sorry, not bishop to b5, but if a7 and king to b7, you have time to play a8 queen, king to a8, and king to b6. And now with c6 and the king to c5, you will pick up this pawns, and this essentially wins the game for white. If you don't want to do that, if you play bishop to c6, then bishop to b5. Now you have time to exchange the bishops and play a8. So bishop to a8, and now c6. Not allowing the king, the main point is to not allow the black king to actually enter close to the pawn, and when the king moves, you play king to b6. At the same time, your bishop is eyeing the e2 square where this pawn can be pushed. So if e3, you can even push g4, and now e2, bishop captures on e2. If bishop captures, you have bishop to a6, not once again not allowing king to b7, and after something like bishop to a8, you can play king to b5, king to c5, and go about attacking this pawn, or even going for this pawn. So it is a winning endgame for white. Just wanted to quickly show you that. But Karpov decided to take once again another route. He played king to b3. So he wanted to come closer to this pawn through c2 or c4. We will see. e3, and now c5 is played. So moving away from the pawn, temporarily sacrificing it because pawn captures on c5, king to c4, king to d6 defends the pawn, but now king to d3. He will pick up this pawn, and this would be pretty much it. King to c7, king captures on e3, and king to b8. Going around so that you can pick up this pawn, bishop to f3, attacking the bishop moves to a4, and bishop to d5. Now centralizing the bishop and using it to essentially help you to win the game. King to a7, king to e4, king to a6, king to f5. Quickly going through these moves because it is pretty straightforward. You want to pick up the pawns. King to a5 and king to g5. Now we see bishop to c2 on this diagonal where this pawn is going. So g4 first, king to a4. Already here Katalymov could have resigned the game, but he still plays a couple of more moves. After king to f6, king to a3, c4, he resigned the game. And as you can see, the main reason is, okay, if this pawn is pushed, then bishop is sacrificed for him, and the king won't have too much trouble coming to pick up this pawn. So that is one of course of action. The other is if you somehow manage to pick up this pawn, you have to do it with the bishop. But then in that situation, you are kind of too slow to stop this pawn. White is faster, and with the king and queen, he can definitely win this game. So yeah, this is pretty much it. This is the only game I wanted to show you from this championship, which Karpov won with an amazing result of 9 wins and 6 draws. So definitely, as I've said, he is ready to face the big guns, and he is ready to face the top players in the USSR. This is the only game because, yeah, essentially other games were kind of won either by some mistake or not really in some manner that I wanted to show it. But this game kind of caught my eye because of this rook sacrifice on c3 and pretty common ideas in the endgame. So this is something that you can use when you're playing with white pieces against your opponent to kind of maneuver your rook in the end game from the king side to the queen side and something like that, so that you can pick up at least pawns on one side and have a pass pawn, which then you will use to essentially win your game. So that should be the main point. And yeah, this is pretty much it. I hope you enjoyed this video, and I will see you next time.